Martin Alder's simulation shows that a safe speed can be maintained, even if all 3 Pitot probes fail. So what could have stopped the crew of Flight 447 from using this technique? Airbus pilot John Cox believes he has identified the answer.
If they were just entering an area of choppy air, they may very well have been slowing the airplane down.
When Flight 447 first enters the storm, standard procedure suggests they would reduce speed. So autothrust decreases engine power automatically. But the pilots don't receive one important visual signal from the thrust levers.
The thrust levers themselves, the throttles, don't move, unlike some other airplanes where you can feel the throttle in your hand moving. With Airbus aircraft, that throttle doesn't move with autothrust engaged, so you have to look at specific engine power indications.
The power indication is displayed here on the central control panel. But if auto thrust switches off while the engines are in low power, the crew might lose track of the low thrust level.
If you're very task saturated, your concentration is going to be directly in front of you. What's the power output of the engines? You're going to have to physically turn your attention and look to the center console area. This is not going to be done as frequently as looking at the things right in front of you. It's certainly going to be in the scan. The question is how often.
The aircraft is now nearer the lower end of its safe speed range. But overloaded by fault warnings, the crew might not realize they need to increase power.
Was this crew one that was very attentive and picked up this information very early? Were they very slow to pick up the information? We don't know. Were the demands so high that they were unable to keep up with it? We don't know.
But Tony Cable finds support for this theory. In 10 previous incidents of Pitot probe failure, the crew fails to immediately control thrust.
In quite a number of them, it's clear that the crews were very slow to get onto manual throttle operation.
In 5 cases, crews don't take control of thrust for more than 60 seconds. For Flight 447, that would mean rapid deceleration and the risk of a sudden stall.
10 to 15 knots would not be unusual. If you decelerate at a knot a second, it's 15 seconds. The aircraft would slow down to a much lower speed, and you could approach a stall quickly in that manner at altitude.
There is a good possibility that at some point in the last 4 minutes that there was a stall event.
The result, a rapidly descending aircraft. However, a stall is not necessarily fatal. There are recovery techniques.
The procedure is full thrust on both engines, reduce the pitch attitude, and the aircraft will then resume normal flight.
By pitching the nose down, the pilot restores smooth airflow over the wings and escapes the stall. But a stall can be an extreme event.
If they were in a condition that it fully stalled, oftentimes when the nose breaks, they'll roll off on a wing, and that's a pretty aggressive maneuver when the airplane does that.
That could mean that Flight 447 violently rolled to one side, more like a fighter jet than a passenger airliner. Most airline pilots have limited experience dealing with this type of event. And complex automatic flight controls mean they do little hands-on flying. For Tony Cable, This reliance on automation highlights a larger flight safety issue.
In recent years, the single biggest cause of accidents has become loss of control accidents.
Modern aircraft are packed with automated flight controls. But are these automatic systems creating modern pilots who are ill-equipped to recover manual control in a crisis?
It has raised the question about whether the situation is actually being made worse by the increase in automation, whereby crews don't get a great deal of opportunity to manually fly the aircraft.
Standard airline flight simulators don't have the freedom of movement to recreate a severe stall.
It moves up and down something like 5 to 10 feet on jacks, and that's just the limit of its movement.
This evidence suggests that if Flight 447 did suffer a critical stall, the crew faced an extreme challenge. A year after the accident, the search for Flight 447's black boxes continues. It's like looking for a shoebox in an area twice the size of New York City, 15,000 feet underwater.
The only way that we're going to find complete and total understanding of what happened to that airplane is if we're fortunate enough to get the cockpit voice recorder and digital flight data recorder.
However, using the available evidence, our independent team has pieced together the possible chain of events. No single link is fatal in itself, but together they provide a plausible scenario for the mystery of Flight 447. Around 2 a.m., Flight 447 flies into a huge Atlantic storm. A possible reason, it is hidden from the aircraft radar by a smaller storm.
We believe that the aircraft was probably in an area of turbulence which had been challenging to fly.
It's possible the storm contains supercooled water that ices up the aircraft.
What's possibly unusual in this storm is to have supercooled liquid water this high up in the atmosphere.
As a result, vital airspeed indicator systems freeze.
There is little doubt that the airspeed systems failed in some fashion, probably due to icing, and that the aircraft went out of control from that point.
The automatic flight systems fail, forcing the pilots to take control.
They were faced with multiple warnings, multiple system failures at night over water, unbelievably challenging environment.
In similar prior incidents, pilots don't follow standard procedure by taking immediate control of the vital thrust levers.
Crews can be very slow to get onto operating the throttles manually, which is very essential, of course, to maintain a decent airspeed.
If they lose or gain too much airspeed, a high-altitude stall would be outside most airline pilots' experience.
Got from 35,000 feet, lost a huge amount of height in a short period of time, and hit the water.
It is a compelling theory. But without the black boxes and their vital data, there can be no definitive proof.
We do need to solve it. Aviation does not do well with unsolved mysteries. We need to understand what happened that night out over the Atlantic.
This Nova program is available on DVD at shawpbs.org or call 1-800-PLAY-PBS.